Hello everyone and welcome to the Space Law and Policy podcast series, episode 6. I'm your professor, Glenn Torres-Spelliscy. Thanks for joining me. The Earth has limited resources, the stars do not. And that is probably the most appealing aspect of potentially sending humanity's mining equipment off Earth and setting its sights on distant asteroids and planets. As humanity's population continues to expand, recently reaching 8 billion, the strain on Earth's resources will only continue to grow. But what if there was a way to get a near endless supply of the resources that we need to survive, right outside of our proverbial door? What if we could stop stripping our planet of its precious metals and resources and instead mine these necessary resources from sterile asteroids and planets? The possibility is there, but can we and should we take advantage of it? And if so, how should we regulate our activity so as to preserve the resources for generations to come? Now, there are obvious questions of ethics. Is it ethical to plunder resources from other celestial bodies? And we have to give careful consideration here to potentially interfering with the evolution of life on the planet or the other body. If we do find life, even if it is in its most basic forms, the justification for taking resources from its home planet becomes hard to establish. But most of the universe remains uninhabited, at least as far as our science can see. So if we determine that mining such uninhabited worlds is ethical, we still have to think about sustainability. Our policy should not intend to steal from our heirs. We need to think about how to use our knowledge of sustainable practices and regulations on Earth and adapt that to future locations in space. Now, before we even get to the questions of whether it's possible and how we should regulate, we have to start with the question of whether it's even worth it. Organizing new mining operations in space seems like a particularly difficult task if there is nothing that valuable out there. So what exactly can we hope to gain from mining celestial bodies? The short answer? A lot. All the bodies in the universe are made of similar elements and materials. They were forged in the same starry furnaces that give us the valuable metals and minerals that we mine on Earth. And while some minerals may be rare on Earth, in space, they are abundant. Comets and asteroids in our solar system alone are filled with a wide range of resources. The potential wealth of those resources is staggering. To some extent, the potential values are meaningless because they would render modern markets, which determine price based on the rarity of the commodity and the demand for it, extinct. Davida, for example, is a 326-kilometer carbonaceous Klondike asteroid containing water, nickel, iron, cobalt, nitrogen, ammonium, and hydrogen. Based on the current prices of the minerals it contains, Davida is worth an estimated $26.99 quintillion. Many other asteroids have similar values. Now, clearly the price points would drop significantly if we were ever able to harness those resources and return them to Earth. Indeed, what was once rare would become mundane. And the numbers are mind-boggling, and if the materials could be integrated into the global economy without destroying it, the potential benefits are unlimited. No more shortages of materials, everything would be plentiful. So much so that some entrepreneurs, including mega-billionaire Jeff Bezos, have begun to hypothesize that we will be able to close down all of the mining operations on Earth and fully meet our needs with those available from space.
Understand what this means and why it's important.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gail. I think people don't understand, or most people don't. And really, if you think about it, we are humanity. We're big now. The Earth is small, it's fragile. In fact, one of the things you see from space so clearly is just how fragile this planet is. Think about the air that we're breathing and this atmosphere. It feels big to us, but it's actually, when you get into space and you can see the Earth's atmosphere, it's so thin and fragile looking. So we do have to take care of this planet. This sounds fantastical, what I'm about to tell you, but it will happen. We can move all heavy industry and all polluting industry off of Earth and operate it in space.
So, are we close to making this happen? I suppose that depends on how you define close. While we are still in the nascent phases, I think it is probably inevitable that within the next generations, humanity will start to mine resources from outer space. Indeed, numerous companies around the globe have popped up with just that goal in mind, and there has been some significant first steps. We've already demonstrated the ability to target and land on a particular asteroid, and we have demonstrated a capability to drill into these foreign bodies, though not yet to great depths. The main barrier now is simply cost. The cost to establish a substantial off-planet mining operation likely exceeds the short-term benefits that we could reap. However, as getting to space becomes cheaper with the advent of new rocket technologies and companies, the potential benefits of mining asteroids might begin to eclipse their costs. NASA has already entered into a contract with 4 companies to return small amounts of the moon's regolith and transfer ownership to the agency over the next decade. Indeed, the moon is the likely first target of our mining operations. While the asteroid belt promises nearly unlimited wealth, its distance to Earth makes it just an unlikely first stop. The moon, however, hosts precious resources like water, as well as helium-3, which holds potential uses with respect to fusion energy. If we could get those materials to Earth, the benefits are potentially world-altering. We could calm the furnaces of the Industrial Revolution, free our terrestrial environment of the pollution that results from heavy industry, and deliver the necessary precious metals and minerals that have fueled the rapid development we see in the computer age. But how would we get the materials to Earth? That's more of a difficult question. As we have discussed to date, we have only returned very small samples from celestial objects. In order to be usable, we would have to scale up our capabilities significantly. Current plans could include simply transporting the materials to a near-orbit location, after which spacecraft could launch, rendezvous, collect the materials, and then return to Earth, while the carrier vehicle returns back to the asteroid to collect another load. That could be a difficult process, however, because of the potential mass and gravitational effects, so it would require some amount of energy to safely execute a controlled landing with the payload. Another possibility might be the use of space elevators to ferry goods between an orbiting warehouse and another on the ground. Of course, there is value also to using the resources in space. The materials could be used to construct space objects, thereby avoiding the costs of overcoming Earth's gravity. Water, for example, could be turned into liquid oxygen and hydrogen, serving as a fuel to propel future space missions. So as we can see, there is both a reason to engage in space mining and the technology we need to execute it's not really that far off. Consequently, the time to introduce smart regulatory regimes is now. The primary legal question with respect to the mining of celestial bodies is this: who owns it? Now, as we've discussed in detail, space law treaties provide that no country can claim sovereignty over celestial bodies. The Outer Space Treaty specifically provides in Article 2 that the moon and other celestial bodies are not to be subject to national appropriation by claims of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means. That language has created some debate and discussion in the international legal community as to whether any type of space mining is legally permitted. Does the language that forbids, quote, appropriation by means of use or occupation, close quote, actually forbid private companies from landing on celestial bodies, harvesting the resources, and then returning to Earth or using those resources in situ? Well, those in favor of private mining operations would suggest that the prohibition in Article 2 applies on its face to states, not private actors. Others would suggest that the idea of national appropriation is more all-encompassing with respect to all commercial actors, whether governmental or non-governmental. If the latter view is true, then all mining activity might be prohibited under current international laws. Still others suggest that the prohibition only limits claims to entire celestial bodies, and that it does not apply to the resources extracted themselves. To explain this idea, let's talk a little bit about a somewhat analogous situation here on Earth, the open seas. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, known as UNCLOS, no nation may claim sovereignty over any area of the high seas. Now, this is similar to the law regarding celestial bodies. However, that same law, under UNCLOS, allows that any member of any nation may harvest fish on the high seas, provided that they comply with other treaties and regulations regarding, among other things, the conservation of resources. So, should space law adopt the same interpretation with respect to the harvesting of resources from celestial bodies? Well, this is the position that the United States, as well as many other spacefaring nations, have adopted. In 2015, the United States passed the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act, which specifically granted property rights to those that could mine resources from the asteroids. Other states have followed suit, including Japan, the UAE, and Luxembourg. Now, on the other hand, UNCLOS creates a different regime with respect to the mining of minerals from the deep seabed as compared to fishing. While fish are arguably a renewable resources, minerals are not. Once they're out of the ground, they do not regenerate. Consequently, Part 11 of UNCLOS establishes an elaborate regime that governs the use and exploitation of minerals in the deep seabed. Deemed by the UN to be the common heritage of humankind, it was decided that an international mechanism would need to be established to ensure that the resources were utilized in a fair and equitable manner. That international governance mechanism is known as the International Seabed Authority. Now, all state parties to UNCLOS are members of the authority. The authority regulates the exploration for and exploitation of minerals found within the deep seabed. To carry out mining operations, private and public entities must first enter into a contract with the International Seabed Authority and agree to be bound by its rules, regulations, and procedures. The contracts may even require that royalties be paid to the authority, which can then be shared for the common benefit of all countries. So there really is no clear answer to the question of ownership of mined resources as it stands under international legal principles. But with the passage of domestic legislation in the US, Japan, and other spacefaring nations, as well as other countries yet to venture into space, it is looking increasingly likely that state practice will allow the mining of resources by private entities. To the extent the international community wishes to establish a regime to regulate that conduct, the time to do so is quickly fading. Well, thanks for joining me this week. I'll see you next week for another episode of the Space Law and Policy podcast series.